The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, brought to you by Osseo Gear with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. Don, it is November 19th. I rolled back into Kentucky last night, but we're going to probably have the most anticipated podcast episode this fall, and it's finally here where you're going to talk about all these bucks that you had on the radar last year. But we're going to save that for a little bit more. But I think everybody's excited to hear about this checklist that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah, I would love to have done this earlier in the fall, but some of those bucks just didn't show up in their fall range until, like right before the rut. And then I had to get them on camera and then have a chance to check my cameras and everything. And just now to the point where I feel I've got a really firm handle on each one of those bucks. And so it's time to share. And I think people are going to find this really interesting. The number of bucks that grew bigger racks this year, the ones that how many stayed the same and how many disappeared.
Yep. And I think it just goes to show that the guys that are doing what you're trying to do, which is kill world-class bucks and not have thousands and thousands of acres on one track, they're going to see the work and the effort it takes to try to identify all these different bucks when they're 3-year-olds or earlier and kind of watch them so that you have a pattern to go after them later in life. I think it's going to put some perspective on that too. But we're going to save that for a little bit later because, how many bucks total are we going to talk about?
17
bucks. So I know that there might be some people that want to just listen to the listener submitted questions and then drop off. So we're going to save that for the end. That way people can decide what they want to do and be respectful of their time. But let's get a quick update. You've been posting the rut report every night here for the last couple of weeks. But it's been about 6 days since we last published or talked about it. What have you seen here the last week?
Well, I think, we're definitely in that lockdown phase where the big bucks are, for the most part, locked down with hot does. But, I posted that, one evening this week that we was in the lockdown phase, and some guy posted, "No, we're not. I seen a buck cruising." Well, every single buck just doesn't lock down. And then when the alarm goes off, they all leave their doe. You've got these bucks at different stages, but for the most part, the mature bucks are locked down. I told an interesting story on the rut report this evening. I got a picture of a mature buck, a 4-year-old, on my place this morning at 7:21, I think when the picture came in. And at lunchtime, I went to town for lunch, and on my way home, I see 3 bucks out in the field chasing this doe around. And one of them looked pretty good, so I stopped and got my binoculars on them. And the bigger buck of the 3 was the same one that was on my place this morning at 7:21. But when I seen him with that doe, he was over 3 miles away. So from about 7:30 to noon, he hooked up with a hot doe because he was by himself when I got that picture. He hooked up with a hot doe, 2 other bucks tagged along, and there they were over 3 miles from where he was at this morning.
Yeah, that's interesting. 3 miles away. You must have left the gate open on that high fence.
Well,
I'm going to start you off right at the beginning tonight, buddy.
Yeah. You're going to start throwing Jacobys at me right out of the gate, aren't you?
It's been one of those weeks, buddy.
Yeah.
No, but so seriously, he was at 7:20. He was at your place, and by noon, he was 3 miles away.
Yeah. It was a little more than 3 miles actually, and that's when I got his picture, that was the direction he was headed. But I just couldn't believe it when I put the binos on that buck. At noon out in the field chasing that doe. I couldn't believe it. I even pulled my phone out and I rechecked that picture. Did I really see that right this morning? And sure enough, yeah, it was the same buck.
Well, a couple comments that I want you to elaborate on about that. Number one, talk a little bit about the lockdown. When we say the lockdown, that means bucks have does pinned down. How long? You and I have talked about this privately quite a few times the last week. How long does a buck normally keep a doe pinned down before he probably breaks away from her and looks again?
Well, typically it's about 36 hours, give or take, anywhere from 24 to 48. Not, 2 days at the max, but usually it's a day, just a little over a day.
So when we say lockdown phase, that means what we're saying is a big portion of the day that buck is somewhere not running around, not searching, just pretty much pushed a doe somewhere, not letting any other buck around it. It doesn't mean that, like you said, the alarm goes off and says 36 hours, everybody rotate,
Yeah.
go pick. It's not a data palooza. So I think what it really says, and we talked about this last week on the podcast, during the lockdown phase, although it's very discouraging because you really sometimes only see a bunch of, younger bucks cruising and checking scrapes, it could change in a minute. You could be on that farm that buck travels 3 miles in 4 hours and all of a sudden shows up. So it's probably the hardest time to grind during lockdown, but you never know what's going to show up.
Yeah, I think too many deer hunters get, they get the idea that what they observed is, good for the entire whitetail range. And so they see a buck cruise by and, they're in the cruising phase now. And they see a buck out feeding and, the rut's over because now they're on a feeding pattern. It just doesn't work that way. And when we say the lockdown phase, we mean that primarily that's what the mature bucks are doing right now. That doesn't mean every single one's doing that, but primarily they're locked down.
And you can still catch them in between those lockdowns, right, where they go from one to the other. So, right. But yeah, I'm sure some of the social media experts always correct you on what you say every day. It seems to happen quite often to me. I had, since we last talked, I had a really, really good encounter with, I sent you pictures of him. He was a whopper. He was at least, low mid 170s, clean 6x6, pretty heartbreaking, but typical of the rut. They came in, they actually appeared on the field. I sent you a picture. They were 280 yards away and worked the tree line all the way around, and the buck went and was behind a tree. And I could have shot him through the neck at 20 yards, but I wasn't going to do that. And then all of a sudden the doe bolted, and he bolted with her. And didn't know I was there, but great encounter. That buck would have met my objectives for the year, but didn't quite get the shot at him. So pretty discouraging after that. Saw one buck, a mature buck on his feet, I believe Wednesday, out cruising, but then the rest of the bucks were 145 and under. So I was in Illinois, I think 8 days, I believe, straight. So I came home last night, giving the property a break for shotgun, and we'll see what happens in late season. Not giving up, just going to take a little break and catch my bearings. It's been cold. I've sat in a tree for a lot of days straight, and it was cold and windy.
Yeah, you definitely sacrificed. You deserved that buck. I told Dwayne Hopkins that I would rather see you kill a deer this year than me, because you've really put in the effort, and you was just a step away from getting her done.
Well, honestly, it's okay, because I could have shot, I don't know how many bucks. I haven't kept track. It's not important. But honestly, 5 years ago, there was bucks that I passed on this year that I would have just said, screw it. It's cold. It's windy. I'm going to shoot it just for the sake. And, I could get somebody to take a picture of a 145 and make it look a 160 and put it all over the social media, and everybody would, no, that's great. But I don't know. I set a goal, and if it takes me 6 years to get that goal, so be it. It's going to be 6 years. I've been very blessed, and I'm not going to deviate on what I want to do.
Well, for me, it's going to be management from here on out. I've got one buck that I seen him a couple days ago that he appears injured, and maybe injured pretty bad. He was a distance away, and he was in some taller weeds where I couldn't get a real good look, but he was limping really, really bad. And I need to get a better look at that buck if possible. And if I can get him in range, and I'm going to have to evaluate whether I think he'll survive the winter or not. And if he looks hurt bad enough, I'm going to go ahead and shoot him, even though he's one I'd want to pass. But the crazy thing is, about 3 days previous, I got some fantastic video footage of this deer in the snow. And it's probably the best video footage I've got since I shot Mel. And I was kind of building a story, hoping to shoot that deer a year or two from now, when he gets a little older. But if he's injured bad, I'm going to go ahead and shoot him. But I've got about 3 other bucks on my place that I want to shoot as management deer. And I'm probably going to burn my tags on those management deer. I've got at least 2 does I know on my place that have twin buck fawns. I'm going to try to get them shot. So once this gun season's out of the way, I'm going to be doing some management work.
Yep. And so anyway, it's all going to unfold a little bit too after we hear about these 17 bucks later in the episode. But for right now, let's go ahead and take a break and listen to a spot from Asio, and then we'll come back with a couple updates before we get into our listener submitted questions.
Asio Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Asio Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit AsioGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Asio Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, thanks to the folks at Asio. We want to remind everybody that they have a Black Friday sale going on right now, 40% off of everything. So if you're looking for Christmas gifts or even late season gear, get on there right now. 40% off. You'll never see it any cheaper than that. I had somebody actually contact us from the Whitetail Master Academy saying that their coupon code doesn't work. And I was like, of course it doesn't work, because there's 40% off standard. So that's this temporary sale is even more than what the normal discounts that we can even offer. So it's a big deal that you need to take advantage of.
Right.
All right. Why don't you give a quick update about consulting? Because I think that you're about full for the year. I'm about full, and schedules are going to be starting to lay out here.
Yeah, I think we've all 5 of us on the dream team, you, me, Wes Delks, Bobby Worthington, Mark Luster, we've all got openings, but we're going to start laying out schedules for this winter. So if you've got any interest at all in having one of us look at your property, you need to get with us. And I know myself that my schedule is pretty tight, because I got several speaking engagements to work in there as well, and other commitments. So, if I go to, say, I don't know, to the south, I'm going to head to Mississippi, for example, first week of December. I'm not going back to Mississippi. If somebody from Mississippi calls later, they're going to wait a year. So I'm not going to be backtracking much. I want to be totally done by the 1st of March, because I got a new property to work on this spring. Plenty to do. If you're interested at all, like I said, the contact info for each one of the consultants on the dream team is on the website, HigginsOutdoors.com. If you want a suggestion on which consultant would be best for your situation, I'll be glad to help you with that. Just contact me direct, and I can put you in contact with the person I think is the best fit for you.
And even all of us, if I know that there's been a couple that have contacted me that after talking with the client, I just didn't think that it was the right fit for me. I've said, you need to talk to this guy instead of me. We're all working together to try to put the right skill set and the right people with what your goals, property, or objectives are. So we'll do what's right for you. Not what's convenient for us, but logistics is the biggest thing. Fuel prices are crazy right now. You can't get a hotel anywhere for a reasonable price. The sooner you all put us on your schedule, the more logistics we can kind of navigate to make it work. Otherwise, like I remember how you used to do it. You'd make like 6 trips to Ohio and 5 trips to Kansas. Those days are done. We can't efficiently take care of anybody running all over the place and being away from our families like this. So try to let us know ahead of time so we can get schedules made up. I think I've booked now. I'm not a preacher by any means, but I'm actually going to be speaking Sunday morning at I think 4 churches this coming winter, talking about Lester's feet and preaching a message from Ephesians chapter 4. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how God can use people that are idiots like Don and I to do a whole lot bigger things, look at the New Testament and look at this podcast. So God continues to use just normal people if you let him. So be happy to come to your church and talk to you about Lester's feet or men's fellowships or dinners or anything like that. But besides that, you got one more, I think, banquet or something that you wanted to announce tonight.
Yeah, I've got several events I'm going to be at this winter, but there's one coming up less than a month away I need to let everybody know about, and it's in Michigan on December 16th. It's a benefit supper for an Amish school, but you don't have to be Amish. Everyone's welcome. The cost of the supper is just a donation, whatever you want to give. It's at the Mapleview School in Vestaburg, Michigan. If you want more information, I've got a phone number here. You can call Nathan, and Nathan's number is 517-726-0518. And like I said, I'll be speaking that evening, December 6th, and I hope to see a lot of you there.
I'm going to be racking a bunch of miles up on that Victory Chevrolet Duramax, aren't you?
Well, I've got my new ones on the way. I talked to Chris this week, and I may have a new one by then. I don't know, but
yep, it's with the miles that you rack up. That's one of the things we don't talk about too much on this deal from Chris Yates is just because you drive Jay Gingrich, he's a customer of Chris Yates. Gingrich Cheap Farms is also a partner of the podcast, but he buys his trucks from Chris. He puts more miles on it than probably both of us combined, and that's okay. He just rotates the trucks, more frequently. So if you have a business or somewhere that the beauty of this is that the $5,000 trade every year is considered an expense. So you can write that off every single year as your trade and still depreciate the truck. So for all of you accountants out there, you know what I'm talking about. All the other people, just trust me. It's a good deal. Don't worry about it. Chris, if you call Chris and tell him what kind of miles you drive, he'll treat you right and tell you which way to go. But for instance, Don's going to be rotating his trucks a little bit more frequently than I do because I have a company vehicle that I drive every day for my normal job. So my truck, I'll probably only rotate it once a year.
Yeah, and I think Jay's rotating his about every 6 months.
Yeah,
so
he puts
a year commitment. Yeah, it's more a mileage commitment than it is a year. But Chris can fill you in on the details.
Yeah, Chris just wants that truck back in a certain window that makes sense for resale value. So if you have any questions about that, just get with Don and I. We can get you a direct phone number to Chris or his right-hand guy and talk about that. So with that, Don, why don't we go ahead and get the first question out of the way tonight? Remember, stick around at the end of the podcast. We're going to go over the $17 that Don had his eye on at the end of last year. But here's the first question coming up.
Okay, the first one comes from Brian Tolliver of Greenup, Kentucky. He says, Don, update us on your experience with Ozonics so far this season. How do deer react? Opinions if it works from a tree stand. Does it affect your health in an open environment? Well, Brian, I'm telling you, I don't know what happened this week, but I swear I got 10 people ask me this question. Most of them didn't submit it. They just sent me a text or something to ask me how the Ozonics thing was going. And I'll be completely honest, I bought that brand new Ozonics, paid $600 for it before season, and I did not use it a single time.
I knew you were going to say that.
I turned it on once, and just to see how loud it was here in my office. That's the only time it's been turned on. Works perfect. If anybody is looking for a brand new Ozonics, I will sell you this $600 unit for $400. The first person that contacts me gets it. Now, I also want to add a story from this week. One of my consulting clients was one of the people that asked me about my experience with the Ozonics. And he said that he had an experience this week with his, that he was in a 360 hunting blind, totally enclosed, all the windows were shut, no Ozonics whatsoever, and he had this particular mature buck pass downwind of him about 20 or 30 yards twice, and the deer didn't even break stride. It just cruised right on past both times. Well, then he turned on his Ozonics to see if any deer would come by and react, and this same buck comes by a third time. And when he hits that scent stream with that Ozonics, he stops and locks up. And he could smell something. He didn't spook whatsoever, but he knew something was different. Something was odd. And he eventually continued on his way, but that deer knew something was up. And to be honest, for me, what I found was I'm carrying enough stuff to the woods as it is. I don't need to carry another, box of, another gadget box just to hang on a tree. So that was one big reason I just didn't want to carry it. The other reason is I'm just a stickler for playing the wind, and because you got to play the wind for that buck. He's got to have the wind almost. And I'm not saying the Ozonics won't work, but just from the way I hunt, and I've been hunting this way for decades, for me to try to change things now is like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. And I just found that even though I thought it was a good idea when I purchased it, I'm just not going to use it. So if anybody wants one, I got a good deal for you.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking, should I buy it? But I don't want it. And I'm not saying that the technology doesn't work. We've talked about it on the podcast. If it's another layer of insurance that you think you need and you have confidence in it, by all means, pack it to the woods. I guess where I have to just be brutally honest with people is just saying it's not an excuse to hunt the wrong wind. And I think that's where all of this stuff ends up going is, I have Ozonics. I can hunt in a spot that isn't the right place to hunt. And, unfortunately, there's just no easy ways for people. It's this easy entitlement society with instant gratification. I get something and charge it up and take it to the tree, and now I can take a big shortcut against the deer's nose. And you're not going to do it. I don't care what people say.
You're right. There's no shortcuts, but it's like the scent elimination clothing or the scent sprays or scent elimination sprays. They all might work to some degree, but if that wind is not right for that buck to feel comfortable, he's not coming by anyway.
Well, welcome to this week's BioFarm segment. I have Wayne Keller on the phone with us. Wayne, how's it going? I think you got a couple properties you want to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I sure do. We've got a couple of new ones coming on the internet and have come on. My son, Andy, has listed 61 acres down in Pulaski County. That is wooded track with a few fields through it and a home on it. Really good hunting track. It's got a good hunting record history on it, and just a pretty piece for the hunter. We've got an auction coming up that is in Jackson County. It's 56 acres, and it's got some good tillable bottom ground on it, real good high quality soils, but it's about 50% wooded, and this is where the hills come off into the bottoms. And I'm telling you, the traffic's heavy here on the whitetail, and the hunting history on this one is also fantastic. He's killed some big deer on this property over the years.
Gotcha.
And
You say that one's an auction though, right? What county was that one in?
That is in Jackson County, and that auction is on December the 15th.
Okay.
And let's see, we've got, my wife Jamie has got that 178 acres here in Randolph County. Now that's down near Turkey Bluff Park Conservation Area. That area has really been known for a lot of nice deer and a lot of turkey in the area too. But it's 178 acres wooded, about 8 acres of woods. Got a real nice cabin on it that sleeps, I think 16 people if you want. It's got air, electric, water, cistern. And another one down in Rockwood. Actually, we've got another one selling down there, 78 acres in about 2 nights. No, it's a week from today. And then we got another one on December the 1st down there. So we got a lot of nice properties, some of them auctioned, some of them wooded coming up. So 40 acres and home in Randolph County that's at auction is December the 1st. December the 15th is the 56 acres in Jackson County. And the other properties are listed, so they're available all the time.
Yeah. The thing that it sounds like you got quite a few new listings, but the thing that's nice about the variety that you've talked about today is they're a little bit different sizes, and some of the smaller tracks, might be a little bit smaller price point for somebody who's looking for something in a certain range.
Yeah, that's right. And the smaller tracks, there's just more people out there that's more in the size range, price range are for.
Right. And all of them sound like they're good hunting properties too, which I think appeals to most of the people listening to this podcast anyway.
Well, the Randolph-Jackson County area down here has had a real good kill record the past few years, and some nice quality animals too.
Right. Well, if someone wants to learn more or has questions about the auction, how can they get a hold of you, or what's the best process to get a little bit more information about any of these properties?
Well, you can go on to look at the properties and sign up for the auctions at buyafarm.com, or they can call me anytime they want, and I'll be glad to talk to them about it. My phone number is 800-357-4020. Like a farmer told me here a while back, he can remember that phone number because it's free gun and a tractor, 800-357-4020.
There you go. Well, thanks for being on the show again this week, Wayne. And if you go out to buyafarm.com, very easy to navigate by counties and featured listings on their homepage. Make sure you're also following them on social media. We appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate your continued support of the podcast. It means a lot.
This one comes from Peter Shell from Milford, Ohio. He says, "Hey, Don and Terry, listen to the show every week. I have heard you guys talk of how new bucks might show up to the farm during the cold late season, provided you have a quality late season food source. I also listened to Lee Lakosky say in an interview that if you can hold these late season bucks until spring green up, that they will usually stick around and stay on your property. Lee implied that the late season is when he recruits new older age bucks to stay on his farms. Wanted to hear your thoughts on this. Also, with early season habitat work in place at spring green up time, how do you avoid blowing out these new bucks if, for example, you had to do some TSI, tree planting, etc.? Thanks, Pete." Well, Pete, first of all, Lee Lakosky is a guy that I would never doubt when he says something about whitetails. He's extremely knowledgeable, extremely successful, but his situation is totally different than mine. He's dealing with much larger properties. He's dealing in a totally different area. I've consulted on farms in Lee's area, so there's a lot more deer habitat there, a lot more deer there actually. And he's dealing with a lot bigger food sources as well. I think Lee told me one time that he leaves, like, if I remember right, it's like 500 acres of crop standing on various farms, and then they'll harvest it in the spring, after the winter, whatever's left. Let the deer have what they want all winter and then harvest what's left. So Lee's situation is totally different than mine, and I'm going to guess his situation is totally different than 99% of the people listening to this podcast. I have never found that to be true. Now, I do attract new bucks in the late season that were not there previously. They were not there during the rut. And a lot of times those bucks come back year after year. But I'm managing and own a smaller property where I don't hold those bucks on my property year round. Even the bucks that are, if you would want to call them resident bucks, the bucks that spend the summer in a bachelor group somewhere else, and every fall they come back to my place in September, October, whatever. Even those bucks are not on my farm in the summertime. It's just a small farm that the bucks leave. Those will stay here and have their fawns, but it's just a totally different situation than what you described. If I owned a bigger property, say several hundred acres in an area with a lot more deer, I would think that what you described would have some merit, but I have no firsthand experience with that, so I really can't say for sure.
All right. His second part of the question is, how do you've talked about your winter projects where you've gone in and done your clear cuts or habitat work. How or what strategies do you use to try to not push deer off your property in the late season?
Well, typically what I'll do is I'll try to save all my habitat work for the spring. You just heard me say earlier, as far as scheduling consulting visits this winter, that I want to be done with my consulting by March 1st this year. And that's because I've got some habitat projects I want to do both on my main farm as well as my new property. So, that's the time of the year to do it. Once those deer have got past that really stressful winter period, where food is scarce and the weather is harsh, I don't want to be disturbing those deer at that time of the year. So I will wait till late winter, early spring, after March 1st, and then I get in there and do it. And when I do, I'm not, lollygagging around. I'm getting in there and getting it done and getting out. If I can possibly do the project in one day, I don't drag it out for 2 days. I'll go from daylight till dark and get it done in one day. So that's how I go about, managing the stress on my property and the deer that stay here through the winter.
All right. Let's do a quick update about Lester's feet before we do our third question. The first comment I'm going to make is we found out about another situation of a young child with a brain tumor from that Southeast Ohio, West Virginia area. And I don't know what it is about that area, and I don't want to open a can of worms on the podcast, but just such a large number of juvenile cancer in that area. But we found another family, thanks to a listener of this podcast, who I'm not going to name. I didn't ask permission, but he told us about this family. We connected with them, trying to figure out how to help them. The mother is a school teacher. The father is a conservation officer. Two just very hardworking people that have just, their world's been rocked, and they had a lot of water damage on their roof, and it was so bad. It was actually pouring in where they were having to set tubs on the floor to keep catching the water. So the reason for me bringing this up is they finished the roof today. But I want to give a shout out to a contractor, an organization over in the Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Their name is Alltech. And this company has now done 3 projects for Lester's Feet to help families. And every time that I call them, just a Christian guys, they're deer hunters. They listen to the podcast also. They are also donating part of their services to these families. Just to make the bill a little bit cheaper to us. So I want to thank, there's a lot of donors that contribute money to this foundation, but there's also companies that we have to source stuff to. And when companies like Alltech in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, will step in, and it's somebody we can trust to go in and do a job, do it right, but then they're also giving us a price break with a donation from their company, it means a lot. So I wanted to thank them. They finished up this job today. I'm not going to mention anything specific about the family, but little boy, the pictures are just heartbreaking. He's got a big cut across the side of his head where they took the brain tumor out. But thank you to those who donate, and also thank you to the contractors, the medical supply companies, the mechanics, all of the people that are so good to us when we call and explain the situation of how we're using your money for these families. And a quick reminder, the Ward Wish Wagon, we need those donation checks through PayPal or via check sent to P.O. Box 250, Dry Ridge, Kentucky, 41035. We need that money by Thanksgiving in order for the Ward sisters to put together those lists to give to those kids for gifts over Christmas. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to go into it in depth. Go back to last week's podcast. We played about a 20-minute interview with Karen Ward. You can find everything there. So,
Question number 3 comes from Clint Cross from Sanborn, Indiana. He says, Don and Terry, you guys always seem to recommend good, solid products, even when not sponsored or before accepting sponsorships. Can you recommend something that we should have that isn't deer hunting related or related to your sponsors? Thank you guys for everything you do. Well, I'm going to have a hard time scratching my head. I'm thinking that if you want a good Christmas gift and you're giving it to a deer hunter, how about a subscription to the Whitetail Master Academy or a trip to the Whitetail Master Class?
Oh, shameless promotion, Don. Yeah. Shameless promotion.
Something not related to deer hunting. Everything I do is related to deer hunting. I'm going to pass this one to you, Terry.
Well, first of all, I want to Clinton and his wife Carly. I actually had dinner with them in Terre Haute when I was up in town last week. They listened. Both Clint and his wife Carly. Carly sits through every single one of these podcasts every week just to get the Lester's feed update. So I told her I was really sorry for having to listen to our nonsense, and she doesn't even hunt. But this is a young couple, super hardworking. If you want a rebuilt John Deere corn planter, Clint is your guy. Get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with him. But no, that's funny. He asked that. I don't think, boy, this is going to go down a rabbit hole. I don't think those of us who were considered preppers 5 years ago are really considered preppers anymore. So anything you can stockpile to be prepared. We saw the turmoil globally during COVID. So I'd say anything to provide for your family if there's shortages of something. I think I'm not considered crazy anymore like I used to be, but I do like firearms. So if you want a big thing that doesn't have anything to do with hunting right now, if your state allows it, is probably the best time in the history of our country to buy a suppressor. If you're into that kind of stuff, suppressor prices and tax stamps are probably about as cheap as they're ever going to be. They just went to an automated ATF paperwork system, so now it's down to like 6 or 7 months. You can put it in a trust. So pretty good stop. We're no affiliation, just a customer. There's a website called silencershop.com that takes care of all of your paperwork if you don't live in a communist state like the state of Illinois that doesn't allow them in the first place.
I'm just thinking, oh, great, Terry, you just opened me up for some government entity to be knocking on my door.
Nope, you can't even, I couldn't even bring mine to your place to hunt coyotes at night. So even if I don't think I can't even bring them into the state, but for the states that allow it, very handy. If you here's another one that you weren't expecting, and we're going to blow up Amazon and blow up this website, but I'm telling you, Don, it's been life-changing. Sepratech underwear. Mark my words, Sepratech underwear. You got to look it up. Yep, Sepratech. Just type it in sometime on your computer. For us old guys, it's life-changing. And I'm not joking. I'm not being sarcastic. This isn't facts from the stand where I make up random stuff. Life-changing. Absolutely.
Sepratech underwear.
Men's underwear.
What, can you take a code brown up in your tree stand in your underwear and it just...
No, let's just say that as you get older, you need some things a little bit more secure than other things, and you don't want everything all getting smashed. So it separates everything. So it's a family show, so I'm not getting any further into that, but trust me, you need to look at it. Life-changing stocking stuffers. Tell Robin you want about 14 pair of them.
It sounds to me like you got some personal problems that I don't have. I thought I'm older than you by 15 years or more, and I have no idea what you're even talking about.
Well, would you Google it after we get done recording? You'll understand it, and we'll probably crash the website because everybody's going, "What in the world is he talking about?" Mark my words. Mark my words. Sepratech underwear.
No man wants underwear for Christmas. Come on.
Life-changing. Life-changing. Well, in all seriousness, I was being serious. I'm not joking around with that. We do have two other things that we need while we're talking about shopping stuff that I need to remind you. Obviously, I've already mentioned the Asia's 40% off. I know of two of our other partners that have special Black Friday stuff going on right now. Quiet Cat, if you look at their website, I think you can save up to $1,200 right now on Quiet Cat with their Black Friday sale. Quiet Cat's the leader of off-road electric bikes. They're really the first ones. There's a lot of different brands. The thing about Quiet Cat, when you get on their website, though, it's a little overwhelming with how many different models they have. So if you're unsure about that, send an email to Don or I, or private message on social media, and we have our own inside guy that works with our customers. So we'll hook you up with our buddy that works there and try to get you the right recommendation for what you need. But Quiet Cat's got a big Black Friday sale. Also, Vortex is having their Black Friday sale Tuesday, the 22nd through the 27th. And they got all different things available for online shoppers. A lot of 50% off apparel and different items on there. So make sure you're looking at that. But Don, one last thing I want you to talk about, because what are you laughing at? You Googled it already, didn't you?
No, I'm telling you what, after you told people to buy underwear, I don't feel a bit bad about telling them to buy the Whitetail Master Academy.
All right, I'm going to put a picture up here, and I want you to talk about it because you were on the list of the preliminary release. So you've actually shot and had the new Mathews Phase 4 for since I believe September. And you posted a picture of that I wish you were holding a big public land buck with it, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But talk a little bit about this bow, what your thoughts of. This was a big jump for you because you went from a Z7 all the way up to this Phase 4. Talk a little bit about it because they just released this bow this week.
Right. I was blessed that Mathews trusted me to get one of these Phase 4 bows months before it came out. They put them in the hands of people they think are going to kill some impressive game, just so that when they are ready to release, they've got some marketing material. And when I got that bow, it was only a couple weeks before season opened, and I was a little bit apprehensive about changing my gear that close to hunting season. But they got a hold of me before they sent it, and their team put the Matthews rest on it, put the string loop on it. They wanted to know exactly what arrow I was shooting and the length of the arrow and this and that. And then they paper tuned it there, and they sent it to me, and I immediately bolted on my sight, that 30-year-old iron crude piece of steel sight. And I went out and I took the Allen wrench with me, so I could adjust my sight. And I went out, and I'm telling you, in 10 arrows, I had that thing dialed in to where I needed it to hunt. And, I posted that on social media this week, and I got raked over the coals by these professional bow tuners. But, maybe a guy that's works in an archery pro shop or something could have tuned it in a little better. But I'm telling you what, I've never picked up a bow that I was able to get shooting on so quick. The thing is quiet, hard shooting. What I like about it is when you come back to full draw, it locks in at that wherever your anchor's at. There's no play there. You're either locked in at full draw or you're not. And I just love the bow. And like you said, Terry, I'd been shooting a bow that was 10, 12 years old. Matthews, my Z9 that I liked so well, I couldn't even give it up. So I'm glad I did give it up. This phase 4 is, if you're not shooting a Matthews, you should be.
Yeah, I'm shooting the V3X. I think it's the same riser, except the stabilizer design is different, which is what I'm most anxious about getting, because you don't have to take your stabilizer off to store it in your bow case. It's a screw on the side that then collapses back through the dovetail in the riser. The limb design is quite a bit different, with those twin sets of laminate limbs on it. And everybody I've talked to said that this thing is whisper quiet and really, really smooth and doesn't jump at all. So the most impressive thing that I've seen, though, is their other bow that they released, and it's not getting any PR. We don't shoot it. Is this bow that's 55-pound draw weight that shoots 335? Is their second bow. So for females or kids or anything, you don't have to sacrifice your speed and kinetic energy for a lighter pound bow. So please go out to Matthews. They forfeit, we're talking about it now, but they forfeit all of their product spots on the podcast. So we appreciate you guys letting us talk about that on this episode, since they just released those bows. So
this is the biggest step we've taken in reducing vibration and sound since 3D damping. What will my new setup do for me that my last year setup did not? Matthews Pioneer Damping. We own silence. We own stealth.
This one comes from Steve Martinez from Homer, Michigan. He says, Don and Terry, I have always been a follower of the late Charlie Alsheimer and his opinion studies. Since I have started listening and following your social media platforms, I hardly follow deer and deer hunting anymore, as you guys are much more in depth with scenarios pertaining to the everyday blue collar hunters. Regarding dispersal after birth, would you agree, disagree on a buck moving up to 20 miles to a new home range? Thanks for all you share. Best of luck the rest of the season. Trump 2024. Well, Steve, I'm not going to touch Trump 2024 yet. The world's in such chaos that I've quit watching TV and I'm not up on current politics, and I'm a whole lot happier for it. That doesn't mean I don't vote and won't vote, but it's just I'm not going to touch the politics. But in regards to bucks dispersing, they absolutely will disperse 20 miles and even further. There's research that was done actually right here in Illinois that they radio collared some yearling bucks, and they found on average those bucks would go between 5 and 20 miles. But in that study, they had bucks that went over 100 miles. So I'd say 20 miles is probably a pretty good average for bucks that disperse. And ironically, you heard me talking earlier about I'm going to do some management on my property, with the deer tags I've got left and what's left of the season. And you heard me talk about shooting a couple of does that have twin buck fawns. And that research, or maybe I don't think it was the same research, it was a different research that has shown that if a buck fawn's mother is killed, he is way less likely to disperse. He'll just remain where he was born. Now, if his mother's alive, when she gets ready to have fawns, when he's a year old, her next set of fawns, she will run him off, and that's when he disperses, when he's a year old. And, he'll go 20 miles or so then. But for the land manager, you want to keep as many of them buck fawns around as possible. And that's when you want to target those does that have buck fawns with them.
You know what else will keep that buck fawn from dispersing? Sepratech underwear. Life-changing.
I didn't know that we've got an underwear sponsor now.
They're not a sponsor.
Little Debbie and underwear.
See what you get when you get me. You never know. See, everybody thought that all these facts from the stands that I was making up all this stuff. This is just the random warp stuff that's in my head all the time. It's what you get. It's what happens when you only get 4 hours of sleep a night.
Well, there's no doubt about it that you and I neither one of us fit in very well with the typical hunting industry celebrities. Not that we're celebrities by any means, but maybe there's a reason we're not.
Yeah, exactly. We're just idiots, like I said earlier. All right, so most anticipated probably episode of the podcast this fall. Let's tee this up in perspective. So potential 2022 target bucks coming out of last late season, doing final inventories. This was a list of bucks that you had high hopes for or wanted to at least see what was going to happen with them. And I don't know really how you're going to do this, but let's go down the list and kind of talk a little bit about them, what you're willing to share and about each of them.
Okay. So at the end of each hunting season, I start taking inventory of bucks that are potential shooters for the coming year. And I usually don't do that until after the gun season. So once gun season's over, that last month or so of archery season, I'm still running my cameras, clear into the spring, but I'm trying to get a handle on which bucks are still alive that might be shooters the following fall. And last year at that time, I had identified 17 different bucks. And I'm going to go down my list. I'm just going to name them buck number one and whatever, and give you a little bit of info about it. And what I think you're going to find interesting is how many of those bucks grew bigger racks, how many of them stayed about the same, and how many of them just totally disappeared where I couldn't find them. So let's start with buck number one. Last year, he was a 6x4. He was a mature buck. I'd put cameras in a new area, and I got this buck's picture. He was a 6x4 typical. And if both sides would have matched that 6-point side, he would have probably scored 180 as just a clean 6x6 typical. And so I had high hopes for that buck. This year, I could not find that deer. I have no idea what happened to him. I had him both in the summer in velvet last year and in the fall in hardhorn throughout the entire season into the late season. He was still there in January. What happened to him after season closed, I have no idea. Never got a single picture of him all this year. So buck number one just totally disappeared. Buck number two was in this very same area. He was a 5x5 last year with forked G2s on both sides. He was a 3-year-old, probably would have scored about, I'm going to guess about mid 150s, 155, we'll say. I did get pictures of that buck this year. This year, instead of having forked G2s on both sides, he just had a forked G2 on one side. He actually lost a few inches. He probably lost between 5 and 7 inches. Buck number 3. He was a 3-year-old last year, but he was a 3-year-old 6x6 that had stickers on both of his G2 tines. He's a buck that I thought had a lot of potential. He probably was pushing 160 inches as a 3-year-old. With that non-typical and gnarly looking stuff and bumps that he had on his rack, I thought this deer could add a lot of inches by adding extra points. I did get his picture again this year. He added about 10 inches. So he's a 4-year-old this year. He's still on my list. And when I make a new list at the end of this season, if I can still find evidence that this buck's alive, he will be on the list again, be a 4-year-old this year, 5-year-old next year. But he added 10 inches. Buck number 4. A buck I had not seen at all. He was a mature buck last year, but I had no history previous to last year. This buck, I got 1 or 2 sets of photos of him in velvet, and then I got 1 or 2 sets of photos of him in hardhorn. I think I was on the very edge of that deer's range. Didn't get a whole lot of pictures, but he was a very impressive, huge frame deer. It just so happens that about a week ago, a friend of mine shot that buck. Not too far from where I got his picture. He scored in the 180s. So it looked to me like he added at least 10 inches. But that buck did get killed. Buck number 5 was a buck that a very trusted friend told me about in a very specific area, a very open ag area, but area with some fence rows and little pockets of cover and this and that. I went into that area this summer with trail cameras on 2 different properties. I had a total of 4 cameras on those 2 properties, right where this buck was supposed to be. And to this point, I have not got anything like this buck was described to me. He was described as definitely an easy booner last year. I have no picture of any buck like that. Buck number 6. He was a 5x5 last year. Very easy to identify. He had one brow tine that was significantly shorter than the other brow tine. That buck is still alive today. And he is almost exactly the same size as he was last year. He's a mature deer. He's at least 5 years old right now. But he is exactly within an inch or 2 of the same size he was a year ago. Buck number 7, also a 5x5. He had really nice brow tines. This is the buck that, if you follow me on social media, back in September, I posted a video clip of a buck with EHD standing out in a picked cornfield. No fear whatsoever of humans. I literally walked up within 15 feet of this deer as I videoed it. Posted it on my social media. This buck, I knew about him the previous year. I got pictures of him in velvet before he got EHD. He added about 5 inches from what he was the previous year. So he did grow a little bit. On that same property with those other 2 bucks, the other 2 5x5s I just described, is buck number 8. He was a big framed 9-pointer a year ago. Just a 3-year-old, real thin rack, but he had a real big frame, wide with tall tines. He disappeared. I didn't get a single picture of him. He was there at the end of last season. He was there in January when season was over. Several pictures of him after the season closed. But this year, I have no idea where he went or what happened to him. He just totally disappeared. Buck number 9 was a buck that I'd been watching for a while. He was a public land buck, actually. Got numerous pictures of him on public land for 3 seasons. And he was very identifiable because he had real long brow tines that formed a V. And instead of those brow tines going straight up, they laid out, almost like they almost followed his main beam, but formed a V. That buck disappeared, and I didn't hear it until this summer, but I was told that buck got shot in the late season last year. Whether that happened or not, I don't know. If I'd see the buck, I'd know him in a heartbeat with them brow tines. But that buck disappeared and was rumored to have been shot. Buck number 10. This buck was a 5x5 a year ago as a 4-year-old. And he had very weak G2s. He had much better G3s than he had G2s. Again, he was a 4-year-old. This year, he would have been a 5-year-old. That buck, I did get pictures of him this year, and he added about 15 inches. So he's a buck that probably pushing about 180 inches this year. I'm not sure if he's still alive today or not, but he was earlier in the season. Buck number 11, he was a 5x5 last year. He would have been 4 years old last year. He had really good brow tines. This is the buck. If you follow my rut report, I posted a picture of this buck on tonight's rut report. That buck, he just totally disappeared. I'll just be totally honest about number 11. He was a buck that was living on my farm. Terry, you seen that buck last year while you was hunting in my place.
Yep.
Easy 170, 4-year-old 5x5. He disappeared during the second gun season last year. I presume somebody shot him. I can't get anybody to admit that they shot him, but I had his picture during that second gun season, but then he disappeared. I think it was the first day of that second gun season. I had his picture. That was the last picture I got of him, and I never had him again. I put him on this list as hope that he was still alive, but I'm pretty sure he got shot a year ago during the second gun season. Buck number 12. He is a buck. He's the 9-year-old buck that we've talked about on this podcast that was on my farm. He was a 5x6 in previous years. Last year, for the first time, he was a 5x. Lost about 5 more inches, but at 9.5 years old, that's kind of expected. That buck was recently shot. He was shot about a week ago, actually.
That buck we both have a long history with. I mean, he's 9 years old. When was his, out of curiosity, since we have such a big history, that buck was injured one year is when he was 7, I believe. Is that right?
He was injured when he was 6.
6. And but that buck covered a lot of ground. We figured out which way he was going, and he went a long way, and would only show up at your farm at specific times of the year, for the most part. But huge home range on that deer.
Yeah, let's talk about that deer a little bit, because he was 9.5 years old when he was just shot about a week ago. The first 6.5 years that deer was alive, he summered off of my place about 1.5 miles away. He would show up at my place in mid-October, around the 14th to 16th October. He would show up for the first time. I'd get his first picture. Then as a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old, as a 7-year-old, he didn't show up until December 4th. And that would have been the year that I shot Mel. And you was going to kill him that year. You was going to hunt him and kill him, but he didn't show up. He wasn't here on camera or nothing.
Well, I was there a lot trying to kill that deer, and he never came. And I mean, we kept passing deer and passing deer and passing deer, and he never came.
And when he did show, it was after the rut and everything. And I was on the road consulting. And by the time I checked my cameras to know he was here, it was after the first of the year. He'd been here about a month. And even then, he didn't hang with the rest of the deer like he had previously. He stayed to himself in one little corner of a switchgrass field. Well, then last year would have been when he was 8.5. He didn't show up until February. I think it was February 4th he showed up. He showed up during the worst storm we had of the whole winter, almost blizzard condition. This buck comes across open farm country and walks onto my place at 10:30 in the morning. The interesting thing about this deer was the first picture I'd get from him every year was at the same fence crossing. And he would come in, the fence is down there, and that's where he would, because that was the direction he was coming from anyway. So last year he did not show up till February 4th. Again, he kind of stayed to himself instead of with the rest of the herd. And he was here for the food. There's no doubt he was here for the food. But the crazy thing is, this year, At 9.5, he shows up earlier than he ever did, and he was rutting. I mean, I seen that buck chasing does. I seen that buck make scrapes, check scrapes. He was on his feet like a 3-year-old this year as a 9.5. Totally went. I mean, I would have never guessed he would do that. And that's what got him killed. He was on his feet looking for does, and he wandered off and got shot. But I would never expect a 9-year-old buck for 2 years to have no interest in the rut, and then all of a sudden he goes berserk.
So his biggest rack was a 5-year-old.
7
was 7 year bigger than the 5-year-old, because
Yeah.
6 years when it was all damaged, right?
Right.
So 7. How big was he when he was a 7-year-old?
Oh, he was probably in the mid 170s. That was the year that I shot Mel in 2020.
Yeah. And then what would you guess he went this year? High 50s
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
mass.
Mhm.
So he lost quite a bit. All right. Buck number 13.
Number 13 is a buck that Terry told me about. Terry had seen that buck cross the road
Giant.
in front of him in the dark.
Giant.
And right where Terry seen that buck cross the road, it was at a bridge. There was cover in both directions. I went, and it's not a place that I'd ever hunted in the past, but I went and used my Onyx and found the landowners on both sides of that bridge and got permission. And I put 2 cameras in different locations, each side of that bridge. And I never did get a picture of that deer. And I've still got cameras there to this day, and I've never got a picture of a good buck. So
It
that
almost-
buck, it was never found.
I got a really good look at that buck because he almost ruined the front end of Chris Yates's Duramax when I was coming across the country that night. But chasing a doe, I saw the doe come across the road, and then he popped up and he about bit it on the front of the truck. But I got a really good look at him. He's a big deer.
I wish I could get a picture of him, but I just haven't been able to find him. So buck number 14, a year ago, he was a 3-year-old 5x5 with really good brow tines. His brow tines were as long as his G2s, and very easy to identify. This year, as a 4-year-old, he's right back in the same place he was before. He added 15 to 20 inches. He's right there at 170 inches now as a 4-year-old. Still alive to my knowledge. He's a buck that I'll definitely have on my radar in the future. Buck number 15 was a public land buck that I was shown a shed antler to by someone I trust without question, who found the shed antler. But that buck disappeared too. Sometime between when he shed his antler last spring, I don't know if he only comes to that area in the late season, after the rut and everything for the food or what. But to this point, I've never been able to find that buck. Buck number 16, another public land buck. This buck added about 20 inches from what he was last year. Got pictures of him from both years, and he ended up getting shot on public land earlier this year. Buck number 17, another public land buck. And by the way, these last 3 bucks have all been public land bucks, but every one of them was on a different public land site. And these sites were separated by, the 2 closest ones are an hour apart. And those 2 are like at a minimum of 3.5 hours from the last one or from the other one. So the last one is a public land buck, had many pictures of him. I have no idea what happened to him. I could not find him. So of 17 total bucks, 9 of those bucks either disappeared or I could find no evidence of them. One of them stayed about the same size as he was last year. One of them lost a few inches, and 6 of them added inches from what they were a year ago. So, as you look at those figures, of the 17 bucks, 9 of them disappeared. Over half of those bucks either disappeared or I couldn't find them. Only 6 of the 17, or roughly about 1/3 of those, added some inches. And then you got a couple that either stayed the same or went backwards.
The thing that stands out to me a little bit about it is, you can tell me to edit this out if you want, but $17, 11 different properties, 3 of them being public.
Yep. I'm covering some territory.
Yeah, people don't realize the amount of work it comes into play when you're putting a hit list together, and to go after and have a target of a world-class whitetail every single year. What you have to do, not owning these 1,000-acre tracts, is cover all of this ground, because you can't put your eggs in one basket.
That's true, and to be honest, I really had to do some soul searching this fall, especially after season opened. I'm not sure that I'm going to continue the same approach that I've had chasing these big deer. I've got a situation now where I can afford to buy some smaller tracts of land, and I'm just tired of dealing with people, to be honest. I've run into more jerks. The biggest jerk I've ever run into in my 46-year deer hunting history, this year I ran into the biggest jerk I've ever run into in my entire life as a fellow deer hunter.
And never met him. You don't even know each other.
Never met the guy face to face. The guy, basically, to tell the story a little bit, I'm not about to mention his name and give him an ounce of notoriety, but he got my photo on one of his trail cameras, on a piece of. I would see the camera before I got in front of him, and then I would just back out of respect for him and move on to a different area. Well, one time about a week before season, I happened to get in front of this guy's camera. The guy absolutely went berserk, sent my picture all over the place to all his buddies. Less than 24 hours after this guy got my picture, the picture was that very picture was sent to me on my cell phone, telling me the story that this guy's going berserk. Then he turns around, he steals my tree stand off of public land, and after he steals my tree stand, he calls and places an anonymous complaint against me with DNR, saying that I was doing illegal things. I'm not even going to get into all the details, because I don't want to throw some people under the bus that have shared some things. I've got to know some local people in that area. This guy is the biggest turd of a deer hunter I've ever met in my life. There's my rant. People want to hear a rant. They like my rants. I just gave you one. This year, I met the biggest turd of a deer hunter I've ever met in my life.
But of the $17, yeah, so $17, 11 different properties, 9 aren't there anymore. 1 got smaller, 1's the same size. Will you be happy if you have a list of $17 after this year?
Well, 17 is the most I've ever had. I'm not going to have 17 this coming year. I just know I'm not. I think, to be honest, I'll be lucky if I have 8, about half of what I had last year. But
right.
I'm getting older, and like I said, I don't want to deal with the people issues anymore. And if I can just buy some small tracts of ground, even if they're the right 20 acres, and just spend my time there where I don't have to answer to anybody, I don't have to knock on a door for permission, I don't have to worry about offending somebody else by parking in the wrong spot or doing this or that. I'm going to slowly, as I can afford it, head in that direction.
Yeah, I think we both in that. We've both had so many, and this deal that you talked about on public land is just one of the many things that both you and I have had to deal with this year, and we've had to have some real soul searching. We enjoy this podcast, but boy, does it open up a lot of things to us. And we're not talking about the nasty comments on social media, but the stuff with people following us around and watching what we're doing and then trying to undermine and do things. This podcast's been a blessing for a lot of things, but there's been a lot of sacrifice that it's brought us as it comes to what we do in the field. And that's okay. We just have to continue to navigate it. But boy, does it make you think about, is it really worth it when we're setting up in the tree stand dealing with this kind of stuff and smoke's coming out our ears?
Mm-hmm.
It was a whole lot simpler when we were just hunting and not talking about it, you know?
Yeah. And I went on a little rant there, but that was just, I didn't even give that situation due diligence of what I could have said. And you've dealt with some situations as well, Terry, and I've got another situation I'm not even going to discuss. it's people have just, they're the ruination of everything good. And today I hadn't listened. I try to listen to our podcast, not all of them, but every once in a while, just to critique myself as much as anything, and make sure that just to see how I sound, coming across, and try to represent myself and you and the Lord in a good way, in a positive way. But today I was listening to last week's podcast, and I was listening to Karen Ward there at the end, tell her, talk about her daughters and the deal they're doing with the gifts for the kids at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And I'm thinking to myself, we're trying our best to use this platform that God has given us. And we didn't do anything special to earn this spot. We're trying to do it to help people. And yet, why are there so many negative people attacking? And I know what it is. I know it's Satan doesn't like what we're doing, and he's using these people. But don't these people realize that they're being used by Satan? I mean, can't people be nice to each other? Can't they see the positive in other people instead of looking at the negative?
I don't know. The world's definitely not going in the right direction, and people have some issues. There's no doubt about it. And you hear about, you listen to that conversation that Karen did, where she talks about her daughter's struggle not being in vain. And then it's like, okay, I'm really going to sit back and complain because some dude that I don't know or had a fake Facebook account called me fat, or poking fun at me because I didn't shoot a deer last year and still haven't gotten it done this year, and I have a podcast. It's like, really, I'm gonna sit back and complain about it when a mother is got 2 girls with cancer and separating that out and trying to do good. I need to hear that message just as much as anybody. So it's if I can make a difference in one person, I'll play off the little Debbie jokes all you want. That's fine with me. I'm still going to hold true. I'm not going to cave. So many of these people that get put in our position, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, feel the pressure that they have to perform. I could care less about what somebody thinks or does, what they want me to kill or what they think I can kill. I have a personal goal, and I'm going to stay to that. And if people want to be along for that journey, so be it. And along that journey, we're going to help a bunch of people. And if you want to be on this ship, get on. We'll take as many people as we want, and we'll make a big impact. If you don't, I'll kick you right in the seat of the pants, and you can go swimming. I really don't care.
Amen, brother. Yeah. We've met so many good people through this podcast. And when I listened to Karen Warden and thought about what that lady has been through with her own children, and then yet she turns around and she becomes, and her girls too, they become a blessing to other people. And if we can assist in that in some little way, well, that's just awesome. And then our listeners jumping on board, and they're supporting Lester's Feet and the various things that we're doing. We couldn't do it without them. So there's been so many positive people that, sometimes we focus on the turds in life and we don't realize that there's so many gems out there too that we kind of overlook.
Well, and we don't hide behind the fact. I'm going to throw this out there as we close the episode off, just to kind of tease it up for everyone. We don't hide behind the fact that we have sponsors and partners for this podcast. There's cost and time associated with this, and there's people that pay for us to talk about their product or use their product, and we hope we are respectful in how we do that and how we choose those. But I can tell you there are going to be changes for next year, and it's not that we're going out shopping other sponsors. If a sponsor that we're working with right now isn't on board with the ministry of this podcast and how we're going to use it to minister and share Christ with other people and to help families with Lester's Feet, we are not going to represent them on this podcast, period. It doesn't have anything to do with how much they give us in product or pay us. If they're not on board with helping us minister to others and help these families with sick kids, we're going to part ways with them. And that's going to happen in some cases. And I'm just being brutally honest. That's how important this is as a ministry for us, that the people that we also partner with and we represent have to be on the same page also.
I'm with you 100%, Terry. You and I have talked about it multiple times. And neither one of us need this podcast to feed our families. Neither one of us are so bored that we need something to take our time once a week to record this. But God has given us an opportunity and a platform, and we're going to use it for good. And we hope everybody's on board, with us. And if they're not, that's their choice. This train's still moving forward.
Yep. But we can't do it without all of you listeners. We've had record-setting downloads for the podcast on all the major platforms and YouTube. Obviously, our friends that listen on MTech and the other dial-in services, we can't really capture how many of you are out there listening, but we want you to know we appreciate each and every one of you. Without your all support, we don't get any of this out there, and most of all, we don't get to witness to anybody. And if anything else, all of this is just, it identifies the turds, but I think it highlights the good people, because I think it gives people enough courage to know that there's other good people out there, because when you're trying to do the right thing, you feel like you're on an island. You feel like you're the only one out there doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, you almost get to the point Satan's trying to tell you it's not worth it. There's nobody else. You can't make a difference. You can't do anything good. He's trying to discourage you. And if this podcast does anything, it identifies the turds so we can all gang up on them and block them and, put them in their place.
Yep.
I'm all for
Flush
that.
them down the toilet.
You're Steve the mailman, or Carl the mailman, as you call him. Your mailman has about lost his temper about 3 times in the last week and a half for us. But, you
don't want to mess with Steven.
It unites us, but it also gives us hope that there's more of us than what we think sometimes when Satan's trying to tell us we're alone. And that amount of encouragement that there's this many people with the same set of eyes on the priority in life, it means a lot. But we don't have that unless we have all these listeners.
Right. Yeah, we appreciate you folks more than you know.
All right. Everybody have a good week. We'll talk to you next week.
God bless everyone. Have a good week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.